We'll get started now. I've got the screen sorted, so I hope you can see it all. So yes, welcome everybody. We're starting a little late, but we should have enough time just to go through all your questions. Just a reminder that this session is being recorded, so you can have your cameras off, which is fine. So you won't, and if you can change, if you don't want your name, then please remove your name as well from your profile if you don't want that to turn up. If you have any questions, please type them into the chat or the Slido. Slido is a document that we use for questions, and you can also kind of upvote questions. So if you're reading other people's questions, you're like, oh, that's a really good one. Then yes, you can upvote so we know the urgency of it, and we'll make sure we'll get to it. We'll do our best to get through all the questions this afternoon, and if we're not able to, we'll answer them on our website if we can. But we should get enough time to go through everything. All right, let's get started. My keyboard doesn't want to move, so I need to use my mouse. So this is the Q&A session for development, for charities who are looking to apply for a development grant fund. Welcome, and a quick introduction of who we have. So we've got the cast team. It's myself, Debbie, you've got Ellie, who you heard, you've got David, and we've got Green on the call, and then we have about 20 charities on the call as well. Thank you very much. There was great interest to join this call, but we, to keep it manageable, we get it to 2021 charities on the call, and we'll make the recording of this session available for those who can't join us. Or if you wanted to share this with your colleagues, they can have a look later and listen later, and we'll add some captions as well, so it should be accessible. So what we'll go through this session, we'll do a quick who's the development funding for, what is it, why should you apply, and then we'll move into questions, and my colleague Ree will come in, and potentially the others as well, to go through the questions that you've posted so far. But feel free, as I said, to keep adding questions, and David will be busy monitoring the questions and flag them as they come up. So development funds. So who should apply for development grant fund? There should be organizations who can show that they're already been through a discovery process. So with that, doesn't mean you've done a discovery learning. You might have your own process that has given you a good place to now, have helped you to be in a good place to apply for more funding. And so it doesn't have to be with us. It could have been that you've done it yourself with an agency already, or maybe you have those capabilities yourself already in your organization. Then if you do, if your answers are yes to that, you are really well placed to consider applying for development funding. You need to be an incorporate charity, not-for-profit, social enterprise. You need to work with communities within England. If you work with communities across the UK, you can still apply, but as long as the focus of this work is within England. Unfortunately, that's a restriction from the funder that we need to uphold. And you need to be able to demonstrate how you share your learning journey, or your journey in your whatever you develop through the 10-week development sprint with 10 other or not-profit organizations. This can be a formal or an informal network, but we do ask that you, in the application, that you can explain how the work will benefit the whole network and the communities they support. So that's something you need to think about when you apply, is how will this funding help not just your organization, but then the other organizations. Why we've done this is because we want to make sure that the funding stretches far. We want to build capacity across the sector. There's a great need for funding, however it's limited. So by working through networks, you can share your learning, you can share the tools, that you use during your learning, and you can share what you've learned at the end and what you might develop. So that's why we ask you to apply as a network. But it will be one organisation applying and one organisation, or potentially two for this, because it might be more money, so you could be shared, but we don't expect all 10 to be proactive and involved, because that would be a bit impractical. So we'd ask them for one organisation really to lead this work. We are prioritising user-led organisations, and with that, you might have seen a question around the percentage of your leadership with lived experience of the communities that you serve. It doesn't mean they have to be former users of your service, but they have to have lived experience and similar to the people that you support. And we just so we'll prioritise applications from those organisations that have that within the leadership. And we will have a focus on marginalised and underrepresented groups, especially BME groups and LGBT. No, I'm always getting this mixed up. LGBT groups. So yes, those will have a slight priority. But if you work with one of the 9 key areas, then please apply. I'm trying to see my chat at the same time, which is a bit challenging in this. Thank you, Taylor. This is in the view I have. Just checking I didn't miss a slide. Even we are struggling with technical issues sometimes. Okay, we're on slide 10. Actually, on 11. Organizations, so we want organizations to be able to demonstrate that they understand how to write a digital project brief, and that will involve having a clear problem to be solved, and that you've conducted some user research and some testing. So actually, you started potentially with a problem. Earlier on, you've done some research with the users, you've done some testing, and you now have a more clearly defined problem that you're trying to resolve. You might have an idea of what the solution might be, but you don't have to have that at this point. That's something you can develop in this once you're successful for your grant funding application. So what do we mean with that? So what can you expect from this program? You know, we're often, especially this time, there's a need for us to innovate and to find solutions, and we might want to create that car at the top line, and we start with a wheel. However, a wheel won't. The point is to get there quicker. With a car, you can get to A to B quicker, but when you develop a wheel, that won't help you anywhere to get quicker. You need the full car to be able to do that. So what we want organizations to do through development when they're successful is to potentially build a skateboard, as you can see in the bottom half of this image, which will still help you to get there quicker. Not as quick as a car, but it will get you quicker to where you want to be and need to be. And you can build on that from my skateboard, as you can see in this picture, and build and potentially over time come to a car. But in this 10 week, we hope you all develop your skateboard that you can start using. Why should you apply for development? Well, there's quite some funding available, 5 to 60,000 funding for those 10 weeks. This is a mix of grant funding to you as an organisation to cover the cost of your resources, the people involved, and some costs related to them being involved in this project, and support from a digital agency. And you will develop and deliver on a digital project over those 10 weeks. So this is the structure of time. The timeframes are very tight. We recognise that, and therefore delivery time is quite set. So the last week of November, you'll be getting ready. Then you'll have 8 weeks to develop, to work intensively with the digital agency. and that includes the 2 weeks holiday. So that on top of that, it's 10 weeks in total. We have accounted for the 2 weeks of the holiday at the end of the year. But you'll have 8 weeks to work, and then there will be an end of at the end there will be another week when you kind of wrap up and you'll complete what we say is a playback, when you kind of present the work you've done, the progress you made, and where you've ended up, and what your potentially next steps might be. What will you achieve if you participate and if you're successful is to build an organizational capacity, design great services, create potentially new services, and deliver better services online. Well, we've come to the questions section, and I'm going to hand over to my colleague Reem, and she will take over on some of the talking. I will share my screen. So Reem, please tell me when I need to click forward, and I will do so.
Yes, thanks, Debbie. So, so hopefully everyone's a bit clearer, but we'll now address the questions that you've sent. You've sent to us directly, and also the ones you're posting on Slido, the ones that are perhaps being upvoted. If there's anything else, as David mentioned, please don't hesitate to kind of feed into that. But so we'll start with the ones that we have. Debbie, I don't know if you want to move the slides, but I have them as well. Can you help us understand if we are ready to apply to development? Yes, we've had a few questions around that. I mean, as Debbie was saying, we would expect you to have done some sort of a discovery process. So to really understand the problem space that you're dealing with and the challenge that you're addressing. So that understanding usually would come through having done some research and some user research in particular, and maybe some testing. So really to have evidenced that challenge and that problem that you're seeking to address, and to have an idea of how you're thinking of addressing it. So whether it's a type of solution or your approach. And as Debbie mentioned, we don't expect like that to be, sort of set in stone, but at least for you to have some sort of clarity and evidence, so to have validated that that challenge. So in terms of the kind of development, I mean, we don't, we understand that organizations are very different and solutions will look different, for each. So we're not being prescriptive about this, but it can obviously be something that's new that you wish to kind of develop. It could be something that's already in existence that you want to integrate better into your services. It can be something that's more internal to the organization to kind of help build your capacity. So something more around organizational sort of capacity building, so that you can then better deliver your services. Or it could be around better delivery of the services, so towards your community and your members. Debbie, I think we can move to the next, please. So the first one, how do we demonstrate that we have a good understanding of the problem we are trying to solve? I think we've kind of just addressed that, but if anyone is unclear, please flag that. We can sort of expand a bit. So that again goes back to evidencing it through user research and research in general. As a multi-academy trust, could we apply centrally for a digital solution across schools? So that goes back to the eligibility criteria. We do mention that you have to be part of, I mean, one, you have to be a non-profit or registered charity, social enterprise. So if you have that charitable status, then you should be eligible, and then you have to look at the network criteria. So whether you actually serve or whether you would be committed to sharing your learnings with a network of 10 or more organizations who have to have a separate governance structure, so they wouldn't be directly affiliated to you under the same kind of sort of incorporation. Yeah, Debbie, if you want to add anything to that, I know you've had maybe some insights more in particular to schools.
No, I think you've answered it great. As long as there's a separate, if the schools have separate governance structures and their own boards, and there's a minimum of 10, then they can apply.
Okay, great. So we'll move to the next one. Does applying for the support precludes an organization from applying for other funding from the National Lottery Community Fund? I mean, in our criteria, you'll have seen that if you have received previous COVID funding, or COVID-19 related funding, then if it's actually for the same purposes as for what you're applying for here, then you wouldn't be eligible. So that this is to avoid any kind of duplication of, what the funding goes to. So you can go through the questions kind of systematically on our, there's a link to our support, like our assessment tool, if you go to the main page, and that should take you sort of systematically through that kind of logic. But if you have, so it's from our side, if you have received COVID-19 funding that goes to the same purpose, then you wouldn't be eligible. But then from the perspective of the National Lottery Community Fund, and in terms of other external funding you might be looking at, you would probably need to look at the criteria under those funding pots and see whether there are any kind of exclusions there. Yeah, from our perspective, we wouldn't be able to advise on that. I think, yeah, feel free to add Debbie as well, or Ellie. So does the leadership need to have previous users or beneficiaries? Yeah, so as mentioned by Debbie earlier, we wouldn't expect that, kind of experience, like sort of lived experience, to be necessarily sort of, kind of as users or beneficiaries themselves, but we would expect, because of when we say user-led organizations, this is what we mean by that. So having organizations who have a certain a part of their leadership who have that lived experience, and who are strongly familiar with the problem area that they're also kind of serving through their organization. So the link is not so direct here, but we would expect some sort of evidence around that. Yeah, could we move to the next slide, Debbie? So could you give a few examples of programs that would be realistic, feasible, so we can understand what might be possible to achieve with the funding? Okay, so I think that goes back to the initial question that I was answering. Again, we would sort of expect clarity around the challenge area, the problem space, and some evidencing and validation of that. So through user testing and research. In terms of the shape or form that it takes, as mentioned, it's, it can be like different things depending on what the organization needs. So it is probably not so useful to provide like very specific examples, because that might kind of put some people off track, but it can be along the lines of, something new to develop, or something existing that you integrate, or just you kind of strengthening practices and services for full delivery, essentially. In terms of demonstrating learning will be shared, what would you need to see, i.e. formal partnerships in the bid or evidence of sharing within our network? Yeah, so that's, we clearly say that we would expect organization to commit to that, to share their learnings with their network. So if you've looked at the application templates, you'll see that what we ask for in the application is for you to list 10 organizations that you would be sharing the learnings with, and that's just sort of information around the name of the organization, a contact there, and then their registration number. So we would just want to see sort of basic kind of evidence that you've thought about this and you have a network ready that you intend to go to. So it doesn't have necessarily to be that you've really strongly worked with them in the past, but it has to be a network that's kind of already there, that you don't need to kind of build through while you go through the program. And this is again just to ensure that the funding is optimized in the sense that the learnings can really be shared widely, because that's one of the objectives, obviously. So partnerships can be formal or informal, but that kind of that network needs to be already somehow in existence. So just some evidence that you'll have thought about that and kind of have a plan around how you would deliver this. And we do say that we can provide a template for you in terms of the sharing. So if that facilitates from your perspective. But at the same time, we're quite keen to hear from organizations how they're planning to kind of do that sharing and that learning, and there may be different interesting ways to do that. Grant source from the National Lottery Fund want to attract applicants from mosques and Muslim communities due to religious reasons. Please advise. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the funding won't kind of work for everyone. So Catalyst, as part of what we do, and CAST as well, we have a number of different resources and tools and services that might be more suitable for different types of organizations. So I mean, at this stage, what we can say is if you visit our website and just go to the resources section, you'll find like everything on there, and you'll be able to kind of go through that and see that there is that there are other funding opportunities and especially for digital, but there are also kind of other free services as well on there that you can access, and a lot of that has been developed specifically for as a response to COVID-19. So yeah, do take a look at that, and if you can't find what you're looking for, then feel free to reach out again.
Can I just add to that the other funding will be with other organisations who are managing funds as well on behalf of the lottery or underfunders that are also focused on digital innovations that are specifically for faith communities and organisations who would who have reservations about accessing funding that from the lottery fund that is generated by gambling activities. So that is not through us, but we're trying to signpost organisations where possible, where we can, and that is on the website.
Excellent, thanks, Debbie. Do we have any more questions? Okay. Can we use the funding to pay for a current development partner if they are amazing? Wow, that's amazing that you have an amazing partner. So, I mean, the way we work is essentially that we work in a very open, we have open processes. So this funding as well is part of that. And so we go through what we call open contracting for the partners, the digital partners. So they have their own route where they go through eligibility and their own application process. So essentially, we would expect the matching between the organization and the digital partner to happen through this kind of open contracting, and to happen after you've been selected or successfully kind of made it through. So if you do know a partner and you've worked with them and you would like to work with them, what we would suggest is that actually you kind of encourage them to apply through that open, and you can have a look at the open projects page. I don't know, perhaps we can share the link to that, but there is a link to it's the open projects page, which you can access through the main page as well, and that's specifically for the partners. And so all the briefs that come from the organization will be posted on there, and then partners will be able to sort of have a look and then pitch for the ones that they like. So, you know, there is no guarantee that actually you'll be able to work with that particular partner, but obviously if things work out quite well from both sides, then they will be able to pitch for that as well.
Can I, sorry, just to add there, if you have a partner and you've done your own open procurement, then there is a possibility to continue to work with them, and you can make that clear in your application. But we would require evidence to see you've gone through an open procurement process, which means you have invited at least 3 potential partners before you selected the one you worked with. And you've done that in an open, transparent way, and you haven't just commissioned and selected one partner. So if you've done that process already, and that's a relationship that is already in place, then please make that clear in your brief or in your application, and then you should be able to continue. But if that's not the case, then it will have to go through our own open procurement process, as we just explained.
Great, thanks for clarifying, Debbie. I think that's really helpful. Okay, final question. Does the grant budget have to include the cost of digital specialist support and who the specialists are? So yes, so the grant, so we say up to 60,000 does actually have to cover the cost of the digital expert who will be working, with you on that. If you have a clear idea of, the costing around that, then please include it, as part of your budget. If you are going for the maximum, then you should estimate that half of that will actually go to the digital specialist. So around 28,000 is actually ring fenced for the digital experts. If you don't have a clear idea of costing, you haven't been able to sort of somehow source estimates, then just make sure you've ring fenced that as part of your budget, and then that can happen. The kind of detail of that can happen at a later stage, but we would expect that you have a clear idea of what types of support is needed, in terms of expertise, and in terms of who the specialists are. So as explained, the matching process will happen after that. So if you have someone and that kind of partnership has come through open procurement, as Debbie was saying, do mention that. If there isn't anyone, then that's what this whole program is also for, is to kind of find those sort of matches and the best fit essentially for you to be working with those who are best able to help you here. Okay, can you please give more information on question 22 of the application form? Does the leadership need to have been previous users as beneficiaries? So I think we've answered that. If there's still lack of clarity, do flag. Or I don't know if there's any other questions, David, that are coming through.
Yeah, thanks, Reem. I've updated that slide, so we might just need to refresh the slide deck that we're presenting. I've added 5 questions that came up on Slido during the presentation. Hopefully they'll come up. If not, I'll read them out. Don't worry. One is about really the discovery versus development. When you say you have to say you have a project in a research stage but isn't yet ready as a formal project, and they're talking to potential providers, should the applicant apply for discovery or development? That's the first one. Don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, Reem or Debbie. It sounds like it's still at initial stage, at research stage, so probably discovery. We'd have to find out a little bit more. What do you think, Reem?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends what kind of stage they're at in terms of the discussions. You know, one useful way of going about this is going through the application templates and just going through the questions on that subject and just seeing if you can confidently answer them. If you feel you can confidently answer them, it probably means that you are ready for a development phase. Otherwise, it probably means that you would probably be best, you know, in a position to go to discovery. Yeah.
Thanks, Reem.
Maybe just, sorry, I'd maybe just add to that as well, that if you, it never hurts to kind of do a bit more discovery. I think if you're in two minds and you think we're already doing some research, so maybe we don't need to do it again, you can always find out more about your users and their needs and the specific different groups that you'll be working with. So that program should really equip you to explore your problem area in a lot more detail and depth, and then feel like you'd be really ready for that next phase of the development funding.
Thanks, Ellie. I'm just going to post some new questions from Slido in the chat, seeing as it's not coming up on the slide. The next one, similar theme, really. When you say you have to have already been through a discovery process to apply for development, do you mean your specific discovery process or something else? I'm just going to copy it in the chat now so everyone's got it.
Yes, I think we did, Debbie did go through that at the beginning. So no, we don't mean obviously our, you know, kind of discovery process. It can be, we call it discovery. So it's just the kind of the process that you would have gone through, but it could be with someone else, or it could be like something you've led in-house, as long as you have that kind of capability.
Thanks, Reem. A few more, and then maybe we can have a breather and open it up for reflections. Can you provide some further information or examples of what you mean by urgent issues/solutions? i.e., does this have to be directly related to COVID-19 issues?
So I think there's maybe two things on that. So one is, you know, we do state the 9 kind of priority areas that we would expect organizations to work on. So that's, you know, the 9 that are listed on the main page as well of the funding. So that's related to your user groups. So usually we would expect users and beneficiaries to fall within one of those, or more than one of those categories. And then the other point, I've lost track of what I was going to say.
Shall I come in?
Yes, please, Debbie.
Yeah, the issue has to be COVID-19 related.
Yes.
So it could be that it might have been an issue you've dealt with before, but you managed to work around, but COVID has made it a high priority, or it might be completely initiated by COVID. But COVID, the pandemic you would have to explain the significance of the pandemic to your challenge and why you're looking to address that. And also we'll also ask what will happen if you didn't address it, if you didn't look to solve it or looked at building a solution for it. So yeah, it has to be a strong pandemic relation and need. Yeah.
Thanks, Debbie. Have we got time for a couple more? We've got a few more coming in Slido, for those of you that are using Slido. So please put a thumbs up if you want to hear some answers, some pressing answers there. A question about networks. Can several members of a network apply with different projects? It's a good question. Seeing as we're asking lead organizations to apply as part of a formal or informal network, could different members of those networks apply for different projects? I think so. Yeah, if they're able to fill the other criteria, there's absolutely no reason why different organisations from similar networks couldn't apply for different projects.
True, but I would say just think about your own capacity. You know, this will be intense, and although it will be learning, you need to be realistic of what you can take on as a network, and make sure that it's still all relevant for everybody. So it's just common from me there. Think about that realistically, because it is a very intense 10 weeks, and by working on it as a network, even with a lead organization, some of that could be shared. Some of the pressures that you can potentially pull people in. If you're working on multiple projects as a network over those 10 weeks, it could require a challenge. Not saying it's not impossible, but just for you to kind of reflect on that before you go ahead with submitting multiple applications.
There's a follow-up question to that question actually that's just come up on Slido. Can several organizations from the same network apply on the same application form? Trying to make sense of that one.
So if you as a network with the challenge you identified, one organization needs to take the lead to apply for it. We wouldn't accept multiple applications from the same network for the same issue. It would be better, so then work together to make your application really strong. But we would only consider one application if it's the exact same network and the exact same challenge. I think that's what was meant to be my question.
Thanks, Debbie. I think we'll get one more out from Slido, and then we can open it up and for any further thoughts. There's one around the timescale really. Is there going to be another round? I think we've got a straightforward answer to this one. By that they mean, is they're still in discovery phase, but probably won't be ready for development phase in this timescale. Will there be opportunity to apply for another round? There are 2 rounds for the development phase, and there'll be a second round opening end of October, is it, for the development program? So if you are going through this discovery phase, there will be an opportunity then to follow on onto the second round of development program applicants. We've updated that on our website the last few days. Debbie or Reem, I don't know if you've got anything to add around those different rounds and timescales that we haven't already covered.
No, I think you covered it. I'm just conscious we've got 10 minutes left.
We've got 10 minutes left. There are a few practical questions on Slido that came up. One is around, we'll be sharing the slides. We will be sharing the slides, and as well as the recording with some captions. We hope to get that up on the website by tomorrow. So please check the main landing page, the kind of funding page on our website. I'll repost the link. And there was another question around accessing our directory of digital partners, which is called Dovetail. I'm just going to post the link now in the chat, so you've got that handy. And I don't know if we've missed any sort of pressing questions. I'd suggest either if you could put your hand up, and we'll invite you to ask the question, and we'll answer it, or just put it in the chat for the last couple of minutes, and then we can wrap up if there aren't any other ones. So I'll just post the other link in the chat in the meantime.
I can't see everybody, so I'll need Ellie or Reem to kind of check if anybody's up.
Yeah, I can't see.
Now.
I can't see any hands coming up, so it sounds like we've covered most questions.
All right, I will start wrapping up our session. So we've got another one to get ready for the digital agency. So yeah, if you do have any questions that you didn't get to ask today, or you go away and they come to you, do email us support@wearecast.org.uk. We aim to get back to you within 2 days, and we tend to be quicker at the moment. So we try to get back to people as soon as we can. And we'll also be adding some of the key questions to the write-up from our Q&A sessions that we're having. Quick reflection. Ellie, did you want to lead on this? I'm not quite sure what you'd like to ask. Did you want to ask anything else we could do here for organisations to help them in their process to apply?
Yeah, I think it was just a nice sort of space really to invite any comments as well beyond the general questions, because obviously we're very much a learning organisation as well at CAST, and we want to make sure that we're as responsive to everybody's thoughts and comments and experiences of this process as well. So if anybody has anything they'd like to share, feel free, or helping us all learn together. That could be anonymously on Slido as well, and don't feel like you have to be publicly giving us any feedback or anything, but it's always hugely valuable and appreciated. Thank you, Phillida. Glad you found it very useful with lots of food for thought. It's yeah, probably not the most filling kind of food over lunchtime, but hopefully if we finish a little bit early as well, you'll get to dive off and have some lunch.
That's it. I'm going to move this on, but I want to allow enough time for people to comment.
Feel free to also just message us with everything. Thanks, Peter.
Great. So what's the next steps? If you have been here with us and you think you've got confirmation and you think development, that's definitely what we should apply for, then please do so. As we said, the questions are on the website, so you can have a look before you register on apply. Check your eligibility with our little tool that's also on the website. Apply before the 20th of September. Please know that, so you have a little bit more time to apply for this. If you are here and you feel that you were better placed to do a discovery learning program first, then apply to that, but the deadline for that is the 7th of September. Just aware that that deadline is sooner. The application is slightly shorter, but still you only have a week left for this week to do that. If that's not ready, apply for discovery. This is the web page where you can find everything about our fund. Also check our FAQ site that it links to, and keep emailing us questions on support@wearecast.org.uk.